Morning brings a scene of horror to grief-stricken relatives who search the ruins for more victims. Chief Luca, the tribal elder. By nightfall, a total of over 300 dead and mutilated are counted. Mao has committed the most vicious atrocity in Kenya's history. Next, as if to signal the beginning of more widespread violence, Mau raiders strike at a native police outpost. Driving trucks right into the middle of the compound, they blast the headquarters building with close-range rifle fire and hack to death a constable and a trustee. They escape with stores of rifles, submachine guns, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. To the military, white settler, and frightened Kikuyu, this planned butchery is an open declaration of war. Rumors spread that over 500,000 Kikuyus have been forced to take the oath. Mau informers mysteriously disappear. More and more villages are burned to the ground. The senior chief of one of the largest Kikuyu reserves is shot to death while sitting in his car. Hundreds of sheep and cattle owned by loyal Kikuyus are slashed and left to die in the open fields. In the following weeks, whole families of white settlers in isolated farmhouses far out in the veldt are reported slashed to death. Identification of suspects is virtually impossible, as loyal Kikuyus fear Mau reprisals to themselves and families. For refusing to cooperate with the police, whole communities are punished. Herds of cattle, sheep, goats, vital assets in the lives of Kikuyus, are impounded by the government and driven away to collecting centers. There, under armored car guard, they're assembled for collection by government trucks and driven to huge stock centers. Kikuyus by the thousands are ordered off squatter settlements on white farms and sent back to already overcrowded reserves. Faced with the possibility of widespread panic and loss of faith in the government's power to protect loyal Kikuyus, Kenya's British governor, Sir Evelyn Baring, makes a flying trip to the outlying native districts. The 50-year-old son of Britain's famed Egyptian proconsul, the late Lord Cromer, Governor Baring proclaimed a state of emergency 6 months before. But faced with an unwieldy system of government in which all major decisions are made in London, little was accomplished for months. Now, in meetings with Kikuyu chiefs of the Fort Hall district, Governor Baring sees first-hand evidence of the problems created by Mau. It is suggested by the chiefs, every one high on the Mau list for assassination, that captured Mau be publicly shot or hanged without benefit of trial. Hang them in front of loyal Kikuyus, they urged the governor. That will give us more heart than anything else. Others remind him that the number of loyal Kikuyus is growing, and since many Mau carry firearms, they ask that the home guard be supplied with rifles and revolvers. Elsewhere, the governor is asked to stop the flood of tribesmen migrating into the reserves. Through his interpreter, he learns that the main supply point for terrorist arms and ammunition is the capital city of Nairobi itself. Is there some way to set up a system of inspection for Kikuyus entering and leaving the city? Government-sponsored hospitals are also visited by the governor, where he comforts sick and wounded victims of Mau attacks. Afterwards, he inspects members of Home Guard units and congratulates loyal tribesmen for their efforts to eradicate Mau. Aware of the difficulties faced by the police in identifying Mau terrorists, he suggests that the Kikuyus themselves will have to rise up and drive Maus from their country. He assures them that the government, together with the army and police, will give them all possible help. He states his conviction that the fate, not only of Kenya, but of much of Africa, depends on the success or failure of their struggle to rid the country of this growing menace. His forecast of eventual and certain victory marks the beginning of a determined campaign to stamp out every last trace of Mau Mau. A few days later, not far from the site of the Lari massacre, Indian workmen begin building a courtroom for the trial of Mau Maus accused of taking part in the atrocity. Ironically, the site chosen for the trial is the location of Jomo Kenyatta's Teachers College. This had been part of his program to develop an African school system independent of religious and government-sponsored institutions. Soon after the outbreak of Mau Mau, it was closed by the government as a suspected breeding ground for the new cult. Now, with tension high, the area is fenced with barbed wire and poisoned spears. Native guards, soldiers of the King's African Rifles, man guard towers day and night and practice defense drills on the alert for possible Mau Mau attacks. In a surprise raid at a police camp some weeks before, a number of Mau Mau suspects were set free by a gang of terrorists at heavy loss to the defenders. Now the authorities are determined to prevent a repetition of such tactics. As thousands of natives are rounded up and brought before survivors of the massacre and questioned, the hunt for more terrorists goes on. 10 more members of the African Home Guard are slashed to death when Mau Maus raid their huts. In a series of scattered clashes, Home Guard patrols retaliate by killing over 30 members of Mau Mau gangs in the reserve area. Meanwhile, investigations are hampered by streams of refugee Kikuyus who have left their squatter settlements on white farms to the north. They flood through the area on their way back to the native reserves. There they seek protection from terrorists and from the harsh measures of retaliation imposed by white settler extremists searching for Mau Maus. The tally of prisoners grows as suspects are captured in camouflaged underground hideouts where they had been living for weeks. Some of these dugouts were plentifully supplied with food, clothing, weapons, and ammunition. Many of the prisoners are European farm squatters who had been allowed to farm in the government-controlled forest reserves. The prison area is constantly searched by men using mine detectors to spot weapons smuggled in and buried in preparation for an attempt to escape. Pangas, axes, knives, and scissors are among the many weapons uncovered, despite the close scrutiny of all new arrivals. As special teams from Kenya's Criminal Investigation Department work day and night screening suspects, the prisoners are fed a daily fare of posho, consisting of 1.5 pounds of cornmeal mixed with hot water and shaped into a ball. Commonly regarded as the staple diet for all Kikuyus, posho is actually a result of the gradual loss of native farmland and the uprooting of their way of life. In the early days, the Kikuyu diet was possibly even more varied than that of the white man's. Maize, beans, peas, millet, sweet potatoes, bananas were planted and harvested on every farm. Sheep and goats were the chief sources of meat. To the Kikuyu, cattle are merely a display of wealth and are almost never killed. Cheap and filling, a steady diet of posho has contributed to the gradual undernourishment now seen to be affecting many Kikuyus. But here, as suspects pour in from all sections of the reserves, it is the only practicable food supply. But despite many obstacles and delays, within 3 weeks, over 300 suspects are held for trials by courts convened under special orders of the government. Because the laws of Kenya have no provision to charge persons with mass murder, each crime had to be treated as a separate incident. However, there was full legal authority to charge and try any number of accused jointly for a murder where evidence existed that they acted in concert and in pursuit of a common design. Arrest and conviction depended almost entirely on identification by surviving eyewitnesses, since evidence such as possession of weapons and blood-stained clothing was lacking. Before marching into the courtroom, the prisoners are given identifying numbers to speed up their processing. In the highest traditions of the legal profession, the Bar of Kenya provides counsel for the accused. The legal staff, some of whom are members of Nairobi's growing Asiatic population, are given 7 days to prepare their defenses. Kikuyu chieftains appointed by the court act as assessors, to help the presiding magistrate determine the guilt or innocence of the accused. The poisoned tips of their native arrows, traditional symbols of Kikuyu law, are examined by an officer of the court. In accordance with British custom, the guard of honor is inspected by the Supreme Court judge, Mr. Justice de Lestang, before the court is convened. Now, as the prisoners march into the former cattle shed that serves as the courtroom for the first Supreme Court trials ever to be held in the Kikuyu Reserve, speculation is high as to the motives that led them to sink to such depths of bestiality. The Kikuyu member of the Nairobi City Council expresses the belief that sinister foreign forces, possibly Oriental, are at work influencing Mau Mau fanatics. Another wonders if they were under the influence of narcotics. In all, 13 trials are held in which 75 men are convicted and sentenced to be hanged for their crimes. Testimony during the trial reveals a large number of the accused had worked and lived in the area of the massacre for over 25 years. Impressive proof of the deep roots of Mau Mau. In speeches from the prisoners' dock, many said they would like to take the Kikuyu Thengi oath to prove their innocence. Each one made a long address to the judge denying his guilt and accusing the prosecution witnesses of prejudice against him. But the judge dismissed such charges as completely unreal. As members of the defense counsel apply for permission to appeal the judgments, teams of laborers are brought in to build special gallows should the death sentences be upheld for those convicted of taking part in the Lari massacre. Aroused by the Mau Mau threat to all existing law and order, government police and loyal Kikuyu begin to strike back with swift and grim justice.